All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Friday, September 22nd, 2023. This is your afternoon update on what is now Tropical Storm Ophelia, about to make landfall along the coast of North Carolina. Our system spinning off the coast today has been named by the National Hurricane Center as of 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and this will be making landfall later tonight across the central North Carolina coast, maybe up into the Outer Banks. Heavy weather is going to disrupt the eastern seaboard. That'll be most of today's video, but we're also going to talk about Invest 90L, our next wave off Africa to watch. This system is gradually organizing and has a high chance to develop as it moves westward over the next few days. So let's go ahead and start with Ophelia satellite presentation of the storm here today. Like I said, has been named as of 2 p.m. The hurricane hunters got up in here this afternoon and found that the system was a little more organized. Some of the big cues from yesterday that we've seen is that the convection is beginning to wrap around our low pressure center. Very visible here today with a lot of dry air on the backside of it, kind of exposing the inner workings of the storm. Something you don't typically see with developing tropical cyclones that are fully tropical, but because Ophelia has subtropical roots, we kind of get to see what's under the hood, and you can see this band of convection moving down along the western side of the eye, or the center of circulation. A lot of the convection being displaced to the north, and there's still some remnants of an old frontal boundary right here. But with enough convection anchored around the eye, this is enough for the Hurricane Center to go ahead and upgrade this, or reclassify it rather, to a tropical storm. The weather didn't necessarily change. The winds are still 60 miles an hour, and they were at 11 a.m. this morning, but the organization has changed enough for them to be confident to call this a fully tropical system, as it sat over the warm Gulf Stream waters for the last day or so. Has become one of those storms. So, looking at the latest from National Hurricane Center, not much left to forecast. Is expected to make landfall by tomorrow morning. So, less than 24 hours from now, probably about 18 to 16 hours. Movements to the north northwest at 12 miles an hour. And again, those maximum sustained winds are 60 miles per hour. And in their discussion, they do note that that could go up a little bit more. This could be a 65 or 70 at landfall. I mean, a hurricane is not impossible, but it would be a very much a peaking, storm where it just barely grazes that hurricane threshold. Whereas, it's not like a significant Category 2 or 3 hurricane coming in. It would be just for coastal towns, may get a little stronger winds. But the big thing to note, of course, is the wind field associated with Ophelia. Again, those subtropical storm routes mean the wind field is much more vast than a typical tropical storm would be, and it's all very much weighted to the north and to the west side. If I turn on the radar overlay, you can actually see this a lot clearer, where all the rainfall is currently falling right now in this big shield that's marching inland throughout the day. And there's not much rain on the backside of the storm, and there's not much rain on this side of the storm, which some of that's just the radar not reaching the storm, but there's definitely some heavy rainfall in here. But this is where the majority of the rain is falling, in this big shield that's advancing inland. So very unusual storm, and it will have kind of some unusual impacts from what a typical tropical storm would be doing. Again, the hurricane hunters got in there earlier today, or they're in there right now, rather. Central pressure just under 990, which is a little bit higher than some of the models thought, but it's about right on track. No big temperature spikes in the eye, which tells us that this, again, has that subtropical route. And again, wind speeds about 50 knots on the SFMR, so you kind of take that up a little bit higher. 55, it gives you 60 mile an hour sustained winds near where that center of circulation is, and likely that's occurring right there in that little convective band on the western eye wall as it moves in. HWRF model showing you the potential for intensification before landfall. Really, the HWRF brings it down a little bit more. It goes 96, 93. This initialized about 3 millibars too high, but we can still take the trends. And it shows a bit more strengthening, and then actually leveling it off just before a landfall somewhere just off to the east of Camp Lejeune. Again, that little inlet right there is New River Inlet, so that's Camp Lejeune and Marine Corps Air Station New River. Cherry Point's up here, so this is coming in somewhere around like the New Bern area. Is about where that's going to kind of move inwards a little bit to the south of the Outer Banks, but to the east of Camp Lejeune, and that is probably where the center is going to come in. But again, very broad storm, so we don't want to focus too much on where that center is coming in. As you can see on the HWRF, a lot of heavy weather is extending well out ahead of the storm and all around it, so it's not like, oh, here comes the center, like the worst of the storm may very well be right here, and then the center comes in, 8 hours later. So it's definitely going to be a windy, rainy couple days up here. So take a look at some of your impacts to come. European models maximum wind gust forecast. You can see a lot of 40s and 50s extending well up even into parts of central North Carolina, well away from the coast. Some 60s mixed in along the outer banks and some of the parts of the North Carolina coastline. And a lot of the sounds are going to have some pretty high winds moving in. A lot of tropical storm force winds move into some of the sounds around the Delmarva region. You're talking about a lot of 40s and some 50s sprinkled in there, and even some 50s along the coast of New Jersey, even upper Jersey, and even into parts of New York. Some of those winds just offshore gusting 50, 60 miles an hour, but probably more like a 30, 40 at the coastline. Current observations do show that's about what we're seeing so far here today. Some of the outlooks out there, Cape Hatteras in the last hour took a 34 knot wind gust, which is about 40 miles an hour. Kill Devil Hills getting into it at about 30 miles an hour at last check. New Bern, their airport taking about 32, 33 miles an hour, and Marine Corps Station New River coming in just at about 30 miles an hour. So the winds are definitely picking up, and they will over the next several hours and really all the day, throughout the day on Saturday until this moves away. Storm surge to come about 3 to 5 feet for some of the rivers and sounds near the coastline. We said yesterday that could come up a little bit more, and it did up to 3 to 5 feet, but 2 to 4 feet is the rule for a lot of folks here. If you're pretty much south of Camp Lejeune, you're probably not going to see much water rise in this, as most of the onshore winds are going to be to your north, and offshore winds are going to be to your south, so that'll keep the surge down quite a bit. But again, some of these inlets where the winds rather parallel that mouth a good bit can cause problems. And up here in the Chesapeake and Potomac, not only are you going to have that surge coming in, but you've got a lot of rainwater trying to get out from the previous rainfall. And you have a lot of rivers already into flood stage, and that wind is going to hold that water back from escaping, so that's going to cause some freshwater flooding issues. The Weather Prediction Center, or NOAA's buoy and river data center rather, showing that most of the rivers in North Carolina are either at near or minor flood stage if they are at all. This has been drier down here, but we go further north where a lot more of this rainfall is falling in Delaware and Maryland and Virginia. There's a lot of rivers already at major flooding stage. All these purples are rivers at major flood stage. Again, two in Dover and Delaware as well. And then we have a lot at moderate flooding stage. And that's before this rain has really fallen. And the Weather Prediction Center is showing the rainfall to come. Another 3 to 5 inches of rain forecast for a lot of this region. So a lot of these rivers in Virginia, you get 4 or 5 more inches of rain. All that rain starts trying to find its way to the coast, and you have that surge slowing everything down. That's a recipe for big water backups and a lot of freshwater river flooding associated with Ophelia. And again, the center of the storm is making landfall down here in North Carolina, and the worst flooding could be very well up here in Virginia or even points northward from there. And of course, where that heavier rain shield does come in, Camp Lejeune is forecast to get 6+ inches of rain from this, maybe closer to 8 or 10 inches of rain. So there's going to be some poor, unfortunate souls who get quite a bit of rain, but this is mostly isolated to the more eastern part of the region. You can see the rainfall. The rainfall will drop off pretty quick once that rain doesn't advance any further inland, because as we see with Ophelia's track, she comes in and then kind of like turns away, and then it'll kind of get absorbed by a frontal system. So there's going to be a sharp divide of where that rainfall just doesn't advance any further inland. So it's not going to be a massive threat well inland, but it will be for your more coastal regions, and that first third or so of some of these states on the inland is where we'll be looking for the most rainfall here to come. So that's kind of the latest on Ophelia, guys. Again, could be a little bit stronger before landfall. I would not be completely floored if this made it to 75 miles an hour. It looks pretty healthy right now, but it would be kind of in a name only sort of thing. It wouldn't really be a true hurricane, but hurricane-like impacts and definitely upper and tropical storm impacts. Please respect it. I would already be very close to being sheltered where I'm going to be over the next day or so as this moves in, especially in North Carolina, where it's going to get pretty nasty tonight. So please stay safe out there, and follow local officials, watch out for the river flooding, all the stuff we talked about. Because a lot of the times these storms don't really get the respect that a big hurricane would get, but then they cause a lot of similar impacts, and then people go, well, what the hell? That was a lot worse than what the news told me it was going to be. But, it's just one of those things where it's hard to communicate what a subtropical storm might bring you versus a hurricane might bring you. But a lot of times they can be very similar in terms of what you feel like with impacts on the ground. So just, keep that in mind and, stay safe out there. I'm also roll to the rest of the Atlantic Basin with Nigel out of the picture. We only have Invest 90L. The rest of the Hurricane Center's map is pretty quiet. Again, Nigel moved off to the North Atlantic. It's no longer a tropical cyclone, and Ophelia is off the coast. So this is Invest 90L. Now a 90% chance to develop in the next 7 days, 70% in the next 2 days. New models are running on Invest 90L. Both the European and GFS ensembles do show that recurve happening. The European model suites are now almost all universally pulling this north of the northern Caribbean islands, similar to what Lee did and similar to what Nigel did. And the GFS showing that even stronger hook as it looks like there's going to be a big break in the subtropical ridge. Probably partially thanks to Ophelia leaving things partially open, but also probably because Nigel just cut a big swath through here, and it looks like 90L, assuming it develops on track and on time, looks like it's going to want to begin to pull out of the MDR and out of the subtropics and into the central Atlantic sooner than later. EPS and GEFS ensembles also over here on Tropical Tidbit, showing you the cluster of potential low pressure centers that we could find going out to next week. And again, this is going to be about 7 days from now before this is even pulling northward anyway. But as you can tell, there's a big high over the eastern U.S., a big high well displaced off to the eastern Atlantic, and it looks like there's a nice cut right here for this system to find some paths northward. Kind of the same story on the GFS model. Bigger high, showing a bigger high here, but again, it looks like there's going to be a break between these highs for this system to escape. And again, all of the GFS and European ensembles for now are clustering north of the Caribbean islands. So good news for them. They may wind up missing out on that. So we're going to keep an eye on that. I don't even remember what the next name is. Whatever comes after Ophelia. So we're into that kind of rare territory where we don't go to the naming list very often. I think Felipe might be next or something. I don't know. It's something like that. But Paulette, maybe? I don't remember. But anyway, so that's our next named storm that will develop, but it looks like it's going to turn northward. And the only thing we're watching is maybe the Western Caribbean. There's been some consistent signal on the GFS members for some crossing over energy from the Eastern Pacific into the Western Caribbean, and the water temperatures here are brutally hot right now because this is the only area that has not been tapped yet. And getting into like late September, early October, this is a region we watch very carefully because you kind of typically have like the Central American gyre low set up. You have some crossover energy during El Nino seasons, and sometimes you can get developing low pressure down here where you get a big high over the eastern US. It kind of forces all the forcing southward, and then you have all this warm water, and typically you can get a low pressure to spawn up here and then move into the Gulf or move towards Florida or kick back out to sea. So I would not be terribly shocked if that's something we're looking at next week, but again, any development of this would be like 7-10+ days, so don't worry about it right now. Just know we get into October, we still have that potential threat, and season's not over once this one leaves the picture, even though the African wave train will be slowing down, although it does appear that we are getting a low wind shear signal in this region, so we may have to watch this region until October as well. So plenty more hurricane season to come is the bottom line on that, guys. And as always, I appreciate you guys watching. We'll track it all as it comes and get through it one at a time. So until then, stay safe. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.